Fighting games were at their biggest in the 90s. Being the hot new genre, making a fighting game was a safe bet for a lot of developers. Because of this, we got many unique and interesting fighters that are still remembered fondly to this day. Developers were able to take risks and experiment with the fighting game formula that hadn't really completely formed by that point. And today's fighter is no exception. Welcome to Weird Fighting Games, Episode 10, Godzilla, Kaiju Daikessen. Godzilla, Kaiju Daikessen is a 2D fighting game for the Super Famicom. Released in December of 1994, smack dab in the golden age of fighters. Developed by Alpha Software. Interestingly enough, this isn't Alpha Software's first try at a Godzilla fighter. A year earlier, in 1993, they released Godzilla Bakoto Retusen for the TurboGrafx 16. It laid much of the groundwork we're going to cover here today, but we're not going to be looking at this one as Kaiju Daikessen is more interesting gameplay-wise. Kaiju Daikessen, or the rough translation of Monster Wars, is an easy game to pick up and play. It's really lenient on the inputs, making it almost feel like a modern game. There are no special cancels in this game, meaning Godzilla won't be doing low forward in the fireball anytime soon. Most of the combos come from links, on the ground attacks, projectiles, and grabs. Most moves have a lot of recovery too, so you have to use your attacks wisely or risk eating big damage. Being a 90s fighter, this game has the modes you'd expect. Arcade and Versus mode. In arcade mode, you can actually pick which monsters you want to fight. After defeating the other monsters, an alarm starts going off and the game starts freaking out, so you know something is about to go down. The final opponent is Mechagodzilla, but not the Mechagodzilla you can pick. This one is from the Heisei era of Godzilla. You see, this Mechagodzilla is actually a good guy designed by humans to fight Godzilla, while the original Mechagodzilla playable in the roster is from the Showa era, who was created by aliens that look like humans, but are actually monkey people. Once you defeat Mechagodzilla, you get one last roar from your monster, and roll credits. For a Super Nintendo game, the graphics are really nice. All of the monsters look as they should, and thanks to the system's amazing sound chip, they sound authentic as well, like they just stepped off the movie screen. Speaking of movie screens, the fights are presented in a widescreen format with this black bar at the bottom, making it feel like you're watching a scene from the movie. For music, it's mostly renditions of tracks from the Godzilla films, but I love this little jingle you get when you win a match. And the Versus screen music is just godlike. This game sports a 4-button control scheme. Light attack, heavy attack, grab, and most uniquely, run. Light and heavy attack do exactly what they sound like, but in the air, you can press down for another 2 jump normals. Grabbing in this game doesn't function like you'd expect. Unlike other fighters, when you grab, you don't get a throw, but you enter a grapple state, which then the player has to input another command to perform the throw. If I had to compare it to anything, it's kind of like those old 2D wrestling games, and get this. You can tech the grab if you press all 4 buttons before your opponent inputs the throw command. Street Fighter didn't even have this feature yet. This game is way ahead of its time. Lastly, we have run. Depending on the character, Pressing the A button allows them to either run or hop like advanced mode in the King of Fighters series. You can run both forwards and backwards, and you have special running normals for light and heavy attack. Despite being on a button, running feels very fluid in this game, and it makes the movement smoother than one would expect for a game about controlling giant monsters. I can't really think of a fighting game that had backwards running. The only one that comes to mind is Joseph Joestar in the Capcom JoJo game. However, the run button isn't just for running. By pressing it twice, your monster will roar, and it's not just for show. It ties into Monster War's interesting take on the dizzy mechanic. You've likely noticed by now the meter directly under the health bar. That's the stun meter. The more you get hit, the more you get stunned, and when it gets filled up, you get knocked onto the ground and are completely defenseless until you get back up. You can mash the buttons to recover faster, but getting stunned in Monster War can be devastating. This is where the roar mechanic comes into play. Roars are unblockable attacks that will build stun when performed. The closer you are, the more stun the roar will do. This can lead to checkmate situations where you can get a free dizzy on an opponent if their stun is high enough. Jumping away won't save you either, as roar can be used as an anti-air. All giant monsters have an iconic roar, and Alpha Systems really took that to heart and made a cool mechanic out of it. The stun bar and dizzies are a core aspect of this game's fighting system, and managing it is key if you want your monster to stay in the fight. Each monster has a little icon near the bottom of the screen that represents their super meter. Once filled, your monster will enter Wraith mode, in which they'll do a whopping 50% more damage, but also gain more stun. If stunned, your monster will lose all of its super meter, so you've got a dilemma on your hands. They also gain access to their most powerful attack, the Wraith super move. It's just basically a regular super move you'd see in any fighting game. When making a Godzilla game, the roster is something you need to get right. For a monster that's 60 plus years old, Godzilla has gone up against his fair share of foes, some more iconic than the rest. It's important that you get your key players like Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, while also including less popular monsters for the sake of variety. Monster Battle balances this well by having iconic monsters like Anguirus, Gigan, and Mechagodzilla, while also giving more obscure monsters like Biollante time to shine. Each monster is fun to play and has something interesting going on. Godzilla is a versatile character who can play footsies, zone, or rushdown. He's overall very solid. Anguirus has no projectile, so he specializes in brawling, with a variety of options to get in. He can crouch very low, which allows him to low-profile things as well. King Ghidorah, on the other hand, is a zoning specialist with a great projectile, buttons, and humongous grab range. He's one of this game's top tiers, and it shows. He's even got a dive kick and a really satisfying stomp attack that the AI has a hard time dealing with. Gigan is another melee-focused character, but has a projectile to fall back on. Gigan is one of those monsters that I always felt was made to be a video game character. I mean, look, he's got hooks for hands and buzzsaws on his belly. His super is a grab that has super armor that can surprisingly go through a lot of stuff, including other supers. Megalon is another monster that looks like he was made for something other than a Godzilla movie, but I get more of a Power Rangers vibe from this guy. Since he's got drills for hands, most of his normals are multi-hitting. He's also got a unique projectile that works as an AoE, opposed to the beams most of the rest of the cast have. Mechagodzilla has projectiles for days. Finger missiles, eye lasers, the works. I recognize most of his attacks ripped straight from his film, and I really appreciate that since Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is my favorite Godzilla film by far. I've saved the best two for last, Biollante and Mothra. Coincidentally, they are also the only two female monsters on the roster. That's right, Biollante is a female monster. The more you know. Starting with Mothra, she is unique because unlike all of the other monsters, Mothra can fly and only fly. It can be real tricky trying to hit her because her freedom of movement gives her such an insane advantage. But she can't block, so if you're able to knock her down, you can land some devastating damage and close the round out in an instant. She's very similar to Pet Shop from the Capcom JoJo's arcade game. And like Pet Shop, Mothra is super top tier. We don't see flying characters in fighting games today because they're likely a nightmare to balance and honestly unfun to play against. If Mothra existed in real life, I guarantee you she would be dead in a matter of minutes because people can barely stand little tiny bugs. If there was this giant big bug butterfly flying around, the world would lose its mind. It would be dead. Biollante, on the other hand, is a very big character and low tier. Her huge hitbox makes her a target, but she's got a number of interesting tools that make her stand out, like her tentacle attacks and anti-projectile wall. She also has one of the most damaging grabs in the game that can lead into almost guaranteed stun. So even though she's not the best, she can still dish out the damage nonetheless. There are also the two boss characters, Heisei Mechagodzilla, which I mentioned earlier, who has a regular form and boss form, and the flying submarine Gotengo, which serves as this game's secret boss, and is like Mothra on crack. It's the strongest character in the game and mega broken. As for the second Mechagodzilla, it's a standard character, and the boss version is just a straight up better version of it. If you're interested, here is the full tier list. I got it from the Super Fighting Wiki, which has a ton of content on this game. It's a really interesting read if you want to know more about the game and its intricacies. Godzilla Kaiju Daikessen is a one-of-a-kind fighter. It captures the grandiose and iconic aspects of the larger-than-life monsters and fits them in this small, action-packed fighting game. Despite the small roster, Kaiju Daikessen uses it well, making no two monsters feel alike, and giving you more than enough reason to try them all. Despite controlling building-sized monsters, the gameplay is fluid, and attacks feel great to land. The stun mechanic alone is worth trying this game out, as I've never really seen anything quite like it. If you're a Godzilla fan, this game is a must-play. It's jam-packed with references, iconic moves, and your favorite monsters. What's not to like? Godzilla Kaiju Daikessen does the king of the monsters justice, but it is most definitely a weird fighting game. Happy Halloween!